Good morning and welcome to the Morning Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Gann, coming to you as always from the Spotlight Studios in Morristown, New Jersey. We got a great panel today. We're talking about a great topic. We're talking diversity in commercial real estate. So let's meet this panel and then let's just jump right into the conversation. So our first panelist was named to the Mid-Atlantic Real Estate Journal's 30 Under 30. She's the director of multifamily at the Blau and Berg company, Karine Blanc. Karine, welcome.
Hey.
Thanks for coming on. Our second panelist is an associate director of corporate transactions at JLL in Washington, D.C., and is the social impact founder, Christina Holder. Christina, welcome. Christina, welcome. Oh boy. Oh, there we go. And yep, there we go. We're good. And then last but not least, she is an associate in the real estate practice group at Akerman in Miami, Florida. Kazarae Lowe. Kaz, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely. So I want to make sure that everybody that's listening to this episode gets a chance to know you guys a little bit better, gets to know a little bit what you do in real estate and maybe how you got started in real estate. So Karine, we're going to start with you if you can take us through kind of your experiences and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So I work in commercial real estate brokerage. The Blau and Berg company is a full-service brokerage firm. I do both investment sales and leasing. I got into this side of the business. Prior, I worked for a commercial real estate investment fund, and then I made the switch to brokerage after grad school.
Awesome. So Kaz, how about you? Why don't you take us through your story?
Like Karine, Akerman's a full-service law firm, originally from Jamaica and moved to New York, where most of my mentors were in the real estate industry, and it was just an organic transition to working in the real estate legal industry. My practice focuses primarily on purchase and sale on a national scope in the self-storage industry, as well as a variety of other asset classes. We also do development work, leasing, and a bit of financing on the borrower side.
Awesome. And Christina, how about you? Round us out here.
I am currently at JLL. I am on the USPS account. My firm, we manage the entire real estate services and transactions for corporate clients and or public institutions. I specifically manage a portfolio of assets, and I've been with the firm for about 3 years. I got into real estate because I'm originally from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I've always lived in the city. I love the city, and it's just been something that I've appreciated just day to day. I did business and finance for undergrad, and naturally, went into real estate and started on, different sides of the business, whether it was working with an owner, occupier, investor, and from, working with a municipality to a large Fortune 500 company. So I have like a breadth of experiences on that end, and I love it. I love it. It fits my personality, and I'd say the only issue for me is diversity, but I know that that's something that we'll get into.
Yeah, that is our topic of today. So we're actually going to stay with you, Christina. So I want to give everybody a chance to talk about maybe some experiences that they've had, like a little storytelling time. Maybe like something that you've experienced that maybe kind of just gives, people listening a better idea and perspective on like when we are talking about diversity, like what it is that we're actually talking about. So can you take us through anything that you have? Absolutely.
So when I think of diversity, I think of it as being like recognizing and, holding space for others, someone who's different than you. And I feel like this is, it's something that we can't ignore. It's something that is embedded in our, our day-to-day lives. We are truly a melting pot, or I guess a salad bowl, rather, because we all have our differences and our different identities that,
I like salad bowl. I like
yes,
that.
exactly.
I like that
we're not all the same. That's an issue. So I myself am working on like my, preconceived notions and like just the different dialogue that I've had in my mind as it relates to diversity. But honestly, it's just about recognizing humanity and just holding space for different cultures. And I feel that we're at a point where this isn't something that, we can ignore. And I get it. I myself don't, when someone texts me saying, oh, we have to talk, it makes me freak out. Like, I don't like that, experience or that anxiety, but this truly is just a difficult conversation that just has to be had. It doesn't have to be addressed daily, but we really do have to change just the culture. And I don't think it's a heavy lift. Like, we're pretty bright individuals, like in our industry, like we can kind of work through this. So I don't think we should shy away from that. And in my experience, I've been in spaces where I've been the first Black person to even work in the department. I've been in spaces where I was one of few women. So for me specifically, I feel that I've dealt with, being different than my counterparts, tenfold, in just so many different ways, just culturally, different components of my identity. And I bring up Cambridge, and I revisit that because something that is done really well in, the structure of the city is that multiculturalism is at the forefront, because, in order to have like a thriving, well-oiled, unit or, team, not well-oiled team, but, experience, it has to be inclusive, and it has to take into the account, all people involved. So I don't know, I can't think of, a specific event, but I know, Karen, you had mentioned, experience being on a panel that you had dealt with that issue.
Yeah, Karen, why don't you tell us about that? Because I thought that was actually interesting for sure.
Sure. So, I can, I could tell stories all day and, I think they're important because after a while, diversity, it just seems like a buzzword. And I think it really, it's really important for us to actually paint a picture of things that are just not okay today in 2020. So, one of the things I can talk about is being a guest speaker at an event and being taken for the wait staff. And this happened twice. One was an event, these were well-known events. So one was an event in Newark where, a BizNow event in Newark where somebody asked me if I could refill the coffee. And one was a larger multifamily event in New York where somebody asked if I could take their coat. And, those are things that I can laugh about. I can laugh it off now, but that's indicative of, people are conditioned to think that way. This is it's not innocent, this is what someone who works here looks like. And this is not what someone who is here to speak on a panel looks like. This is how people's brains are conditioned, and they're not even aware of it a lot of the times. So I tell these stories to kind of bring forth that. Even early in my career, I went to, so in commercial real estate brokerage, you can have an open house, which is usually a large number of brokers that will go to the site just to check out the site for a client or two that they have in mind, that sort of thing. So it's typically like a big groups of brokers. And there was an open house that I went to pretty early in my brokerage career. It was an industrial site that was for lease. And I go there. And there's about 25 brokers in the room, and I'm literally the only woman and the only person of color. And experiences like that, it's just, and that's an experience that was not anybody's fault, right? Because whoever showed up to the event. But right. That was really, when I walk into a room like that, it was summertime, I'm in a dress, it's like glaringly obvious that I'm both the only woman in the room and a person of color in the room. And people are looking at me like, what is she doing here? And then you start to develop that imposter syndrome. In my mind, I'm like, wait, what am I doing here? And I tell that story just to give some perspective on what kind of feelings go through you, because the reality is when there are not people who look like you in a particular industry, you don't think you belong there. And it's not just an industry. It could just be a room. It could be, you're in a neighborhood and nobody else there looks like you. And it makes you feel like you don't belong there. And it takes a lot of awareness to fight through those feelings. And that's why, that's why I tell some of these stories. I can, one time I was looking for a personal mortgage. This was like in the last 6 months. This was pretty recent. And I go to the team page. So for whatever reason, this mortgage company got my attention. I was looking for a personal mortgage. So this was not like a professional errand I was running. And, I was like, oh, I want to talk to somebody at this mortgage company about, what kind of mortgage I could get for a property I was interested in. And I go to the team page and there's 30 mortgage professionals. Again, not one woman on the team page and not one person of color on the team page. And that is something that in 2020, it just can't fly. If you are the CEO of a company or you are running a group, you need to go to your team page. If there is not a person of color, or there's not a woman on that page, you need to go and find one. This has to be very intentional. It's just, we can't fall victim to these unconscious biases or, these words that we're using. There's no excuse not to be aware in 2020.
Right. Yeah. So Kaz, I want to get you in here. So, you've waited a little bit. So why don't you jump in with any of your experiences and kind of your perspectives?
Well, similar to Karine and Christina, it's really being on a deal team and being the only woman or the only person of color, being on in a real estate group, a national real estate group, where there are only 3 associates of color and no people of color in the partnership track or partner. And like Karine said, it's 2020, and more so than checking a box and saying, yes, we have a Black associate, an Asian associate, a Latino associate. It's more so investing and being mindful of the implicit bias and investing in the existing talent and motivating them to want to stay. Like, there's a quote that's always been thrown around in the legal industry. We lose people of color to in-house life because they seem to find it much more appealing. And the rebuttal is, what's making law firms not a place to stay for people of color? And I think that's the task that, at least for my industry, the partners and the big law firms really need to tackle, because representation does matter, but it's more so not checking a box and saying we have X amount of associates, but do these associates feel valued? Do these associates feel like they belong? Are they contributing in a meaningful way? Do they have sponsors? Do they have advocates in the industry or in the institution itself? And where will they be in 5 years from now? Will they still be at the law firm? Because it's not been the case over the past 20 or 30 years in the legal field.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's not a heavy lift. I don't think that it's
Christina.
So
Hey, Christina, can you just start that over?
Oh, sure. I think my connection was bad.
Yeah.
Well, I was saying that I don't think diversity is this huge conundrum. I don't think it's like so hairy and it's just like this huge, heavy lift to deal with. I think it's quite simple. And the best way, like I can maybe like a metaphor, like if you, Mike, are going to the barbershop to get a haircut, would you let a barber who has never cut a man's hair before cut your hair?
No. I mean, I don't have that many hairs left, but I go to the same barber every other week for the last 2 years, and she's great.
Well, yeah. So for example, right, like this, right. You want your barber to be well versed in the hair that you have in your head, right? Or at least, it's okay if it's a woman, that's fine too. But if a woman has never cut Mike has never cut your hair, I think it's an issue, right? So I think that kind of speaks to why you need diversity of knowledge and of your your counterparts, because we're going to be doing business with each other. Why would you want to transact or do business with someone who has no idea about your experience? It's just, it's like read the room, right? Like, we can't be tone deaf anymore. And if you look at the labor market, right, women we're some of the, they're highest educated, our educational attainment is, it's incredible, especially given how expensive formal education is in our country. But we are ambitious, we're incompetent, and, we're here, it's pervasive. Like women and people of color, we are the majority in a lot of talent pools, right? Based off of just the raw numbers. And so it's just a matter of just kind of opening and expanding our horizons and just kind of, educating ourselves about a particular culture. Like we can't fear something that we don't know. And I feel like there's a lot of resistance in general. Like if you don't understand something or if it's not, and I get that, we're social beings. We want to, we want to go to, what we understand or what we're familiar with, but we can't do that in in the workforce, like there's growth on the other side of discomfort. We have to, we have to be representative of, our, of just the diversity. And I hear a lot that there aren't enough, there's a pipeline issue for talent. This is one of the reasons why that, there's a lack of diversity in leadership roles, but it's not. Like I implore everybody to like, go look at the US Census, like go look at the numbers. There's so many, the percentage of the population or Latinas, right? In the next 10 years, just in the trend of numbers of, college educated, professionals are just going to be staggering. It's going to be staggering. And so how can you sustain a business that excludes that experience? People don't, culture is really important. It's a two-way street for companies and diversity.
Right.
And I agree with you. There's not a pipeline issue, what I should say is that the pipeline issue is not as exasperated as some of the narrative is being made to seem. Yes, there are some pipeline issues, but like they are out there, the diverse candidates, like they're out there, but then it comes into question, as Kaz mentioned, the retention, because a lot of it, that's the issue. It's not that there's nobody in the pool to choose from. It's that maybe someone came through and they're no longer here. So now you have to go find another one. So that's a second piece of the picture that a lot of people that, I saw that in corporate America, corporate commercial real estate America, where it was just a revolving door for diverse candidates. They were in and they weren't really, they weren't supported. And that becomes an issue because then you constantly need a pipeline to feed it rather than retaining really strong talent.
Yeah.
Or looking at and thinking why people are constantly leaving. They're not feeling supported. And I think it's an excuse to say that there's a pipeline issue. It starts at what are the recruiting practices? And then after the recruiting practices, what are the, methods that you implement to keep people of color thriving in that specific organization. And it's a very reflective process, but I think there's a point right now in America where organizations realize there's a problem and really do want to fix it. So I don't want to lose that momentum that we have. Yeah.
Karine, I want to just touch on something that you had mentioned in your original point, because you mentioned the team pages, basically like the white male team pages. What are some other things that can't fly in 2020? Because we've come a long way as a country, as a society, as a culture and all that. Still we're working on some stuff, but what are some other things that you think we, that can't be flying right now?
Sure. I mean, anything that's visual, that's how I think of it. You have a public website page that people are going through, on a daily basis. You can't, and to Christina's point, I don't necessarily have to work with a person of color or a woman, but I need to know that you support them in your company. You know, I could work with anybody, but I need to see that representation that you support them in your firm. You know, it's the same thing with panels. We have a lot of panels that are still predominantly white male, you know, very often, all the time, you know, and there has been a lot of push for that recently, which is positive, but I still see it all the time. You have 10 panelists and they're all white men, you know, and it's not a pipeline issue. It's a lack of intention, and people just need to be very intentional.
Yeah. Christina, you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have so much to add, but I'll choose one, just one. You know, Mike, we've been living this our entire lives, like since we've, you know, could work, right? Well, we haven't worked our entire lives because child labor is not legal. But once we entered the labor force, it's something that we wake up and think about every day. Like, we wake up knowing that we are, you know, we're a woman, and then we're also a person of color. So those are two, like, we have to have this double consciousness. So what I think, to Karen's point about how it's really important that we keep up this momentum, and what Kaz was saying, like, keep this dialogue, and we make certain, you know, we ensure that the intention, you know, doesn't get distracted and doesn't go away. We want to keep it, you know, centered and focused and on target. And honestly, I think that, you know, diversity and inclusion is great, but I think the next frontier of that is belonging and equity. So it's not just a matter of making sure someone's, you know, inviting a person of color, or inviting a woman to the table. It's you know, giving them equity in the decision-making process, helping, because you need diversity of opinion, like as we had mentioned, to reach your, you know, your target base for your clients. It's just not enough to, you know, once we get to more diverse, you know, collateral, we also need, you know, diverse opinions and diverse thoughts as well, because honestly, it's good for business. It's good for the bottom line, and it's equitable for everybody. You know, it's a win-win to have that in your organization. So I think that, in short, in 2020, what won't fly anymore is, you know, just the performative diversity. We need to aim for establishing belonging and establishing, you know, a tolerant community for everyone in, you know, in real estate industry.
Right. Kaz, anything to add before we move on to our next topic?
What won't fly anymore is having diversity and inclusion officers at an appointed role, but then your organization is a toxic culture that full of sharp elbows, and there are no diverse employees. So that's great for your webpage and for your press article, but it has to have some mindfulness behind it, where you're tackling the implicit bias in the organization and not just saying we have a diversity officer, but
yeah,
your culture is still bad.
Right. It seems pretty hypocritical for sure. All right. So I want to get into something that, you know, Karen and I, we did the Morning Spotlight started as a LinkedIn video series, and Karen was one of our guests. So she's an original member of the Morning Spotlight. She's in the Hall of Fame. And we did, like, our last question that we talked about was sort of in this realm. And this is what kind of led us to putting together this episode. And we talked about, I remember talking about some things about, like, you know, how do you change this? You know, like, how do you make this better? You know, so I know that we've touched on some different things, but I think more of the stuff that we were talking about are things that we're seeing happening right now. So I think maybe it would be cool to kind of talk about some things that, you know, like, what do you guys think is going to make a difference? You know, like, what is the industry, the commercial real estate industry as a whole, like, what does it need to do to make some positive change and start to get out of this mode that it's in right now? So maybe Kaz, we can start with you if you want to kick that one off, if you're up to it.
I mean, it's a theme that we've been talking about for the representation. I think representation really matters, and these organizations have access to some of the most diverse, well-educated talent pools, and they exist within the industry and in their organizations, and they just need to be nurtured, promoted, and in order to add value they need to feel valued. And I think the industry needs to do a better job at tackling representation and nurturing the existing talent that's there, like Christina and Karine. I mean, we organically love real estate in a natural way, and we're genuinely interested in it. We just need to be nurtured and valued in order to.
Yeah, absolutely. Christina, how about you?
I honestly, everything, that Kaz said, I completely agree. And I know, people may want to, people mean well, but yeah, an actionable plan is what's necessary. I really like, the idea of, I love sports. I played sports growing up. So I think bonding is, really powerful. And the ways that you did that was by practice or by, having some way to, rely on your teammate. So, I mean, I participate in the JDRF real estate games every year where, we raise money for different causes. And I think that's such a great event. Like, I would love to see more activities like that because it's just an incredibly diverse group, and it's like we're all kind of just focusing together on this mission. And I think that's like a great, metaphor for what needs to happen in the industry. We need to just kind of forget, everything else and just focus on nurturing, like Cass said, these relationships and kind of just really supporting your team, supporting your unit. How do we do that? We can do that, once we think beyond race and we think about humanity and we think about compassion. I think we'll find a lot of answers to our questions of how is this supposed to happen? How do you treat a teammate that you just met? How do you consult, how do you build, how do you fellowship with, some of your best friends? Like, think about that and translate it into your team. I know it's work, but it is our livelihood. We spend most of our waking hours focused on work. So maybe just go an extra mile by, just bonding, honestly. Stepping outside of your comfort zone.
Definitely. Karine, take us home on this one.
Sure. Yeah. I think it requires real action. I can talk to the Blau and Berg company, my firm here, where there are 3 Black people who work here, myself included, and we are all here because of one person. And that's my mentor, Christian, who's a broker here. And that's all it takes is one person. And he is not a person of color, but he really cares about diversity and he really sees the value in diversity. So there's a lot of people who are not of color who care about diversity, but they don't know what to do. And that's just an example to show that all it takes is one person who really cares about it to bring more people on board and really make sure that they're supported, and we're all here because of him. And I do feel supported by him. And it's just really important to have that, and it's something that I wish everyone could have. And I work for a relatively small firm, so 3 is like a number that I'm actually okay with. Right. It might not sound like a lot for a JLL or Akerman, but I work for a pretty small shop. So to me, this is more diversity than I saw at my prior company. So. And I just see that all it takes is one person who really cares about it. And, to Christina's point, someone who's just really compassionate about that mission.
Absolutely. All right. So does anybody else have anything to add on to that? Because we're going to move this into our closing segment. Good? All right. So we're moving this into our closing segment, which is called Under the Spotlight. So each of you will go under the spotlight, and we're going to ask you for a bold prediction, a final point, something that you think would be cool for the listeners that have been listening, made it through this whole episode so far. They want to hear walking away they want to remember as your final point to them walking away from this episode. So Christina, I'm going to put you on the spot, put you under the spotlight first. What do you got for us?
I think bold, personal responsibility. My bold prediction the remainder of 2020 is that, we're going to shine a lens on everyone, right? No one will be spared. And if you're not helping solve the problem, you're part of it. And I think that's going to be true for everybody. It's just, we are in a time where accountability matters. And it's kind of, let's think of it as like recycling, because we know that climate change is a huge issue. We know that, waste management is a hot topic. Just think of it. If you don't be that person who doesn't recycle, You know, don't be that person who doesn't participate in diversity. You know, like it's just simple as that. It's not rocket science. I think that it's just a matter of just doing your part.
Right. Kaz, how about you? You're under the spotlight now. So this is big time. So what do you got?
For narrow, I'm going to be bold, and I'm going to say the next 10 years, I see executive committees and board of directors really changing to be more representative of society. And that might not mean just people of color, but more women and LGBTQ. And I think that would be, I know it's a very optimistic goal, but I hope in the next 10 years that these boards of these companies, especially these real estate companies, will be more reflective of greater society.
Awesome. Love that. Karine, final word. We started out with you. We're going to finish up with you. So you're under the spotlight now. What do you got?
So I'm going to follow with our previous theme of what's not going to fly in 2020. So what's not going to fly in 2020 for diversity is just, we're just not going to lay over and take it anymore. And we're going to force conversations on people and we're going to make people uncomfortable, you know, because it's a conversation that needs to be had.
Awesome. So for everybody listening, that wraps up our show. Hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank our panelists, Kaz Lowe, Karine Blanc, Christina Holder. That was awesome. Had a lot of fun doing that. For everyone listening, I am going to put their contact information in the show notes. So if you do want to reach out to them, ask them a question about the topics that we covered today, about what they do, how, you know, maybe you guys can work together. So that stuff will be in the show notes. Their contact information will be in the show notes. If you are interested in being a panelist or a guest on the Morning Spotlight, or if you want to hear us talk about a specific topic, make sure to go to themorningspotlight.com or email us at themorningspotlight@gmail.com. Make sure if you're listening on iTunes to subscribe, leave us a review, the whole deal there, leave us some stars. That's always great. Christina, Kaz, Karine, thank you so much for doing this with us today.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, ladies.
Bye, ladies.
Absolutely. And everybody else, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.